Thanks, D. We have actually a lot of questions for you if you don't mind hanging on for a
Okay,
minute.
I don't.
Hello, speaker. Hey, D. Okay, so we're ready for a few questions. So, first question
Okay.
comes from David, where he's asking about he already built an application, but he's getting no volume. No one's really downloading it. Is there any tips you could give to developers that already build their application? How do they, in a world where these markets exist? Obviously, when we worked on the old web, we had SEO to get confused with. But what is the way to actually get your application to be more noticed on when you're building an application on your own? And if you have tips for that.
Well, I probably don't have as many tips for that because I'm typically doing something more, like commercial, um, that makes it a little bit, easier.
Okay, so we'll ask a
So
few.
I'm taking the person who has friends. So first off, I would just, suggest um, trying to get everybody, social media to tweet that application, get people using it, and having them, tweet it.
Do you find that as an important, obviously an important component when you're building applications, figuring out how to integrate social media into them, or it depends on the application as well, or is that a critical
Well,
point? Also,
of course,
it's a good question for a commercial application, which you build mainly large scale commercial applications.
right,
How do
right,
you
right.
guys how do you guys go through the process of taking an application that first goes live and getting it to be hugely successful?
Well, see, that's the problem, right? Is that commercial applications, like Sprint, we can, kind of just, depending, we can promote something, on our homepage. Where a ton of people, come through and and click on that page. We have a lot more capabilities than somebody, small, and an individual. Um, and there are tons of articles on that, how to get your app noticed, kind of thing. But I am not an
Fair enough.
expert on, how to get your app noticed.
We'll definitely ask. One tip I could give about that, obviously, is try to find other sites that talk about applications and try to get them to talk about your application. And end of the day,
Well,
it's
and
going to be
that's
harder for
really
you to
that.
first. Mhm.
That's going to be that way with everything, right? It's all about,
Yeah,
getting people to reciprocate and, say, hey, I will, promote you if you promote me, kind of thing.
right. Yeah. Is it? There's always hard work involved, but it's rewarding after you do it for a while. And the more you do it, the better
It
you
is.
get at it. So we have we have a couple of questions from, and sorry if I'm reading this wrong, Shami Sith. Whew, that's a big one. Shami Sesh. So he was tweeting and asking two really great questions, which I've encountered so many times as well. Oh, and obviously for you it might be a little bit easier. Correct me if I'm wrong, because your main client is one client and they know what are the technical needs. But as you work with other clients that are not as technically savvy, and they
Hmm.
insist on specific UIs, and they don't want to work with the native UIs of Android or the native UIs of iPhone. How do you deal with those scenarios? Such as, for example, some clients will want to have their application look the exact same way on an iPhone and an Android, even though it's not the right thing to do from a design perspective. How do you manage those situations, or what would you do in those scenarios?
Okay, well, really in the end, you're the boss. Even though the client is the boss, they hired you as the expert. So I think it's totally okay to, come back with, some hard evidence saying, okay, so well, we've got standard controls. And to get the app okayed by Apple, for instance, we are going to have to use, their controls. So I can't use that checkbox, for instance. So it can't be the same, on both. I need a back button. There are certain elements, and there's plenty of evidence on that human interactions uh,
Mhm.
site for iOS to to prove to the client that that really that certain elements need to happen, and it can't be the exact same experience on both. Now, there's a lot of times when you can, for the most part, let's just say that maybe only 5% of the app needs to be a little bit different, for both. It's nice to think that you can design something for, design once and export for all, but that's just not reality. So you are still the expert that they have hired.
Mm-hmm. So there's a follow-up question here from, well, I don't know exactly what the question is, but I'm getting the heart of it, where basically Shami Seth is talking about, I guess it's a specific scenario they encountered where the calendar in the iPhone is completely different than the calendar control on the Android.
Oh,
But I
yeah,
think you already
absolutely.
answered that question in a way of saying, yeah, you have to work with the built-in tools, just because of the fact of all this, all this research that all these phones have, and the users are expecting those specific behaviors. And end of the day, I think, um, end of the day, sorry, John, 1 second. End of the day, it's really just a question of making sure that you could communicate with your client and explain to them that it's their best interest to work in that way, because you don't want your application to be rejected. And even if it wouldn't be rejected, you don't want to surprise users with behaviors that they're not expecting. If I'm an iPhone user, there's a certain way that I'm used to working with applications. And if you create that surprise, basically Dia saying that you're just going to create more disappointed users. Users are not looking for their UI to be reinvented. They're looking for their design to be beautiful and their interaction to be beautiful. But they're expecting a specific
Absolutely.
user flow. So I think a follow-up question that I have on that, just to wrap these topics, is really a question of, you build obviously a lot of applications with Sprint, and one of the stuff that always fascinates me is how do you actually and do you actually learn from every application that you build, besides your own personal experience? Is there any statistical ways that you actually gather information about the users to improve the applications in the future?
Well, there are. We have all sorts of ways to get information about our users. So absolutely, I mean, if I'm, it kind of depends on what I'm designing. I'm going to totally, I mean, just like I would for any website, I am going to think about my audience and what that audience is and what, they're expecting. So if I was designing, something for kids, I'm not going to use, the same sort of design that I would use, for, adults, for instance. It would be more colorful. It would have, more icons. It would be, easier, for you to use without having to, read, anything. So it's just going to be a different experience depending on, the user. So absolutely, that makes all the difference in the world.
Like, I can give you an example just from, because this is obviously something that personally it interests me. If I go, for example, working throughout the years, I worked mainly for large advertising companies. And in large advertising companies, there really isn't too much user research. All that research is done before the campaign starts. When the campaign started, you just hope that it actually will work, because it's already too late, because it's already out there, and you already got paid, and usually you don't get paid again to go back and tweak it. And obviously for me with my website, which is completely different, that I already have for a year, every single month I'm looking at that statistical information and I'm tweaking it and tweaking it to try to improve the conversion rate, to try to improve the user experience. So really, I guess the big question is, how important is that as you're building a mobile application, even if you see that the application is successful because you have a lot of downloads. But does it go down in the Sprint workflow where 3 months after that you read into the statistical data and then you get an understanding, okay, these stuff we should change because of X, Y, and Z, or these colors could work better? I know like Google has these, not only Google but a lot of different analytics sites have a way to show the user a little bit of variations, two different variations on the applications. I know this is kind of a little bit off topic, but it's very, very interesting to hear how a major company deals with large scale applications. Do you guys do you guys, like the Netflix style of building where you build like three, four different variations and see which one people like the most? How do you actually come to the conclusion, or is it based on research from previous applications? It's just a really fascinating topic, which I hope you're allowed to get into and delve into.
Yeah, no, I think that it makes a big difference, but we don't make a bunch of different, versions of things. Like, well, the Sprint Zone, the very first version of Sprint Zone, the one that's out there right now, um, wasn't even supposed to look the way it does, and it just somebody got lazy, as far as I'm concerned, and just kind of made it. Um, Went, okay, well, then we'll just use this. It was just like a wireframe that somebody had come up with, and time constraints, happened, and they just really kind of took that wireframe. It was never even designed. So then we kind of like sat back and thought, oh, wait a minute, this is really fairly ugly. It's easy enough to use, but it's just boring as heck, and nobody wants to interact with it. So boring. It can be something that can be clean and simple, but if it's just boring and nobody wants to use it, then it's not accomplishing anything. And what we wanted to accomplish with that particular app was being able to have less care calls. So if they could, for instance, pay their bill and do certain things right there inside of the app instead of having to call care for it, or even go to the website, just do it right there on their phone, then that would save, like, honestly, it could save like 5 million, a month, something crazy like that, on care calls.
So,
So
Shami,
this new
continue
version,
on.
I mean, we kind of took some of the feedback and made this new, made the new version totally different, and just because of the feedback. So I think you can have iterations, each time you update the app, if, you're hopefully, taking into consideration, feedback that you're getting, and changing it.
I think I'm going to try and paraphrase you and let me know if you agree with what I'm saying, is that you feel like that a good design is really the most important part. First, build a really good design. Over managing the analytics on a mobile device might be not as smart as just listening to users' feedback directly instead of trying to automate it. Um, Especially if it sounds like it makes sense. And end of the day, overthinking the technical side might make you forget about the visual side and kind of focus on the visuals, where people obviously choose stuff because they look good and they interact well. So, for example, when you get feedback, is that something that, sorry for delving so deep into this, but when you're getting feedback, um, I'm guessing that a company the size of Sprint gets a lot of feedback. How do you prioritize feedback? Is it
Yeah.
based on something that people request a lot of times?
Well, we also have control groups, so a lot of times those will be the ones that we will listen to the most.
That's a really great way to end this. That also, when you're building a mobile application, a really solid idea is find other mobile developers, give them your application for free, ask them to give you feedback directly. So instead of throwing it to the world and hoping that people will like it, find 100, 200 people, start giving the application for free, just getting their feedback and interacting with them, and that would be also a great way for you to get SEO on your app, because if you gave the application for free, there's a good chance that they'll want to tweet about it or want to put it on their Facebook if they really liked it. So it's kind of like killing two birds at the same time, which it kind of loops back how you could do it also on the personal level. Less than using analytics, just approach those pros, send them an email, give them the app for free, ask them if they're willing to check it and give you some feedback on it, and just open doors with people. I think we lost David, it seems like, because David is not replying his email. I know that he was going to take a vacation from Flash, and it seems like he's taking a vacation from us as well. So one is, by the way, Shamimesh, Shamimesh said thank you, and we want to thank him for thinking and being interactive. So we'll contact you through Twitter to figure out how to send you a gift, which will be a T-shirt.